So for this week on Cyber School, as we're kind of nearing the end of our summer season, I'm going to talk about 5 challenges that you can encounter when dealing with outdoor paging. A lot of the times when folks are dealing with a paging system, they really just focus on the interior of a building, areas where people are the majority of the time, say an office area, a warehouse, hallways, a shared space, something like that. But a common place that people will forget or really neglect to consider doing any paging is outdoor areas. And sometimes there are some challenges that you might encounter that sometimes can be unique to outdoor paging. You can still encounter them in general, indoor paging, but some of them can be kind of unique when you're dealing with outdoor paging. But before I get into some of those reasons, let's talk about some reasons why you would even consider doing outdoor paging in the first place. People aren't always outside. The majority of the time they're inside. So, why would you do that? Well, sometimes they aren't always inside. Sometimes people will congregate in just a parking lot. People go outside occasionally for smoke breaks for those, that still smoke, or, they might be outside, kind of like where we're at CyberData, where there's a nice big forested area that, people can go walk their animals or just, get, break up the minutia of being in the office. So people will sometimes go outside, and this can be both, patrons to, the business or location that you're dealing with, or just your general employees. They can congregate outside, at a parking lot to look at somebody's new car, or just have their lunch break outside. Sometimes people like to get outside at, certain points. And also students frequently spend time outside during their, day in class, where it can be, time in between classrooms, say for middle school and high schools, as students go from, classroom to classroom in between their different periods, they're out there. But there's also things like recess and PE where they might be outside. Of course, you've also got shipping and receiving areas and maintenance sheds and just places where people might actually be outside for doing work. So there's a lot of reasons to consider doing some outdoor paging in addition to the indoor paging that you're typically going to consider. But when you're dealing with that, there's some specific challenges that, of course, you can encounter some of these when you're dealing with indoor paging areas, but sometimes you really encounter these when you're dealing with outdoor areas, just because there are some potentially unique challenges when you're dealing with stuff like that. First and foremost is the Ethernet length limit. There's only so long that you can run these particular cables before you start getting, voltage drops for power capability, or just, data loss as you start going over the recommended length limit. You also, since you're going to be putting stuff outside, you're dealing with general mother nature. So you get weather and birds and other animals. Sometimes they like to nest in, all sorts of weird places. So, that can be a very unique challenge that you can run into. Also, mounting height and just general mounting locations can be sometimes a challenge depending on the facade of a particular building that you're working with. And also, intelligibility distance is another thing to consider as you're designing, a complete paging system for an indoor and outdoor facility. So first, let's go over some options that we have here at CyberData. What products do we have that are actually outdoor rated that you can use outdoors? And when we're dealing with these products, of course, we're focusing on our paging centric products. We're not really going to be touching on our intercom products that are also IP65 rated that can be used outdoors. We're really strictly focusing on paging, which is why you won't see things like our outdoor intercoms located in this list of options. But of course, we've got our IP66 indoor horn that's available in 2 varieties, both SIP and Informicast, which is basically SIP with the cherry on top of Informicast support. Our loudspeaker amplifier, of course, available in both SIP and Informicast capability. And finally, the paging amplifier, also available in SIP or Informicast enabled capability. Of course, do keep in mind, if you opt for the paging amplifier instead of the loudspeaker amplifier, the paging amp in a box, you do want to put that paging amplifier indoors. That thing is not IP rated, or at least water rated for IP rating. So you don't want to have that outdoors, and you do want to have your horns outdoors if you're intending to page in an outdoor facility. So let's talk a little bit about, your Ethernet length and your mounting options. Of course, when you're dealing with an Ethernet cable, and for those that are unfamiliar with that kind of terminology, that's just your regular Cat5, Cat6, Cat7, what have you, your typical Cat cable as it's referred to. And that has a length of 100 meters in between point A and point B. Point A being your switch or your different network connectivity point that you're connecting it to, and B, the tail end of it would be the endpoint that you're connecting it to. In this case, and for what we're talking about here today, that would be your piece of CyberData equipment. And it's typically 100 meters. If you convert it to freedom units, it's 328 feet. Of course, when you're dealing with mounting these units on the exterior of a building out there on the facade, you're kind of dependent on how that system is designed. Some different styles and things that people can use for doing the facade of a facility can be different when you're dealing with different styles. It can be a stucco, it can be a cinder block building in certain parts of the country, and even internationally, you can deal with brickwork. So it can be very challenging in some areas to go and mount some of this equipment on the exterior of your facility. So depending on just what the actual design of the exterior of the facade looks like, that can really impact your mounting capabilities and your mounting options out there. And of course, when you're going and mounting things, it's not just what surface you're going to connect it to, but also the height and how high you want these things up, because that's going to play a big role in sound dispersion. Usually we recommend anywhere between 15 to 20 feet for a particular height. You can go above that. You can absolutely go below that. But depending on how high you mount it, plays a really big role in mounting level. Say, for example, you're dealing with an awning that would be over a classroom, so maybe 12, 13-foot awnings, in front of the classroom. So that way, as the kids are going in between classrooms, they're not getting rained on. If you have a horn right there, kind of underneath that awning there, maybe 10, 12 feet in the air, you can't really have that thing cranked to max volume because you're going to blow out everybody's eardrums. And vice versa, if you have that thing mounted 20 feet in the air, you can't have that at a low volume because nobody's going to be able to hear it. So you really have to crank that level up. So you have to find that kind of happy medium in between your height and your volume level that you're looking for the actual capability in terms of mounting. And of course, when you're dealing with Mother Nature as it is, you're putting stuff outside. So you really want to be cognizant of different things that you can run into. Birds are, they can be very challenging, especially in your area. If you're in an area with a lot of birds, they can nest just about anywhere. I've had birds nest, on the top of, my porch light. They go and build something there. They will nest anywhere that they can. And a nice little re-entrant horn or a horn might have a nice big opening, seldom used, usually pretty dry. Might be a good spot to build a nest. So you really want to have some kind of a screen, which is why our IP66 horn, both in the Informacast and the SIP variety, comes with a nice screen over in front of the actual speaker diaphragm. So that way it prevents any bird nesting or any bugs, hornets or what have you. We get a lot of hornets and wasps out here in my area, and that can be real challenging. So just having some kind of a screen in front of the actual unit itself can prevent any kind of birds or bugs or what have you from getting in there. And of course, since you're going to be putting this equipment outdoors at a minimum, you're going to want something like IP65 rating. So that way it can, withstand any weather that it's going to be outdoors. Of course, all of our CyberData paging equipment, our loudspeaker amplifier and our IP66 horn are IP66 rated. That way they can prevent any potential damage from water or dust that might be encountered in that particular location. Of course, that's not the end all be all. You also want to consider the actual directionality of the horn itself. You don't want to have that thing pointing up because even if it's IP66 rated, if it's pointed up, water can get in there and water will pool in there and collect. So you really want to have kind of a downward angle with anything that you're going to be mounting in an exterior location. Finally, another big thing is intelligibility. And intelligibility is kind of a confusing word if you're not familiar with it. What is an intelligible? That's how far away you can actually understand the announcement. You might be able to get, say 1,000 feet away from the speaker and you can hear that it's making noise, but if it's not intelligible, meaning you can't understand it, it's not useful. So when you're dealing with something like this, you really have to consider that, everything is going to have a limit in terms of how far you can actually throw audio and get audio out in an area of dispersion and have people actually understand it, which is why things what are known as re-entrant horns, the horns that we pair with our loudspeaker amplifier and our paging amplifier, use that style of a horn. And without spending, an hour talking about how that horn design works, they have the best intelligibility distance rating, meaning from the actual horn itself, the farthest distance way is typically going to be a reentrant horn over a speaker or a loudspeaker, just because those have a different style in sound generation, and a reentrant horn is really geared for throwing the sound in a very large distance in both, complete, distance from it and off to the side as well. They're just really good at making sound in outdoor facility, but they can be a little challenging to install because, with our unit, you have to install the horn and then run that cable back to the actual loudspeaker amplifier to plug it in. Whereas our IP66 horn is an all-in-one unit, and it's a really good medium, depending on the actual distance that you need for that intelligibility. So there's a lot of things to consider as you're going and picking a particular product for something like this. So to summarize everything, outdoor paging can be kind of challenging, as compared to, say, an indoor facility where it's just, I've got drop tile ceilings, I need ceiling speakers. Pretty simple. And then you're really just picking the individual features of, the equipment that you're working with. Well, when you're dealing with outdoor paging, there's a lot of things to consider. As hopefully you kind of learned today, there's a lot more parts and pieces that might go into an outdoor paging system. And a lot of those can create, potential issues you have to design around. If you're an area that, is very wet, humid, you might get a lot of rain, you might consider something like our loudspeaker amplifier and reentrant horns, because the reentrant horns, God forbid, if any damage happens to them, they're a lot cheaper to replace than something like a complete all-in-one unit. But if that fails, you got to replace the entire all-in-one unit. So there's a lot of potential issues that you might want to design around as you're, picking an outdoor style paging system. And of course, do consider that, when you're dealing with your actual mounted height, your volume is going to be kind of paired to that. Again, if you mount something kind of low, you're limited as to, how high that volume can be. And on the other hand, if you mount it very high, you're kind of stuck going with a very high volume. So the biggest thing to remember as you're dealing with this outdoor paging system is you don't want it to just be loud. You want it to be intelligible, meaning people can understand it. And that's your main goal as you're designing an outdoor paging system.
Thank you for watching this edition of Cyber School. If you have any questions, please get in contact with our sales department. They are available by email at sales@cyberdata.net or by phone at 831-373-2601 extension 334. Please make sure to like this video and subscribe for more content like this from CyberData.